This isn't revenge. This is the truth.
The October rain drummed against my windshield like angry fingers as I pulled into the driveway of our modest two-story house on Maple Street. Another 12-hour day at Thompson's Auto Repair behind me, grease still caked under my fingernails, despite scrubbing them raw in the shop's grimy sink. At 48, I was tired in ways that sleep couldn't fix. My name is Jake Sullivan, and I used to think I knew my life. The porch light was off again. Marta had this habit of forgetting to turn it on, leaving me to fumble with my keys in the dark like some stranger trying to break into his own home. Maybe that's what I was becoming. I'd barely gotten the front door open when Amelia burst past me, her face streaked with tears and mascara. My 21-year-old daughter clutched something in her trembling hands, a small digital recorder, the kind they use in college journalism classes. "Dad, wait." Her voice cracked like thin ice. "I know this is going to destroy everything, but you need to hear this." The living room felt different somehow. The family photos on the mantel seemed to mock me with their frozen smiles. Marta's coffee cup sat abandoned on the side table, lipstick staining the rim in a perfect crescent of betrayal I didn't yet understand. "Amelia, what's wrong? Where's your mother?" "She's upstairs on a conference call." Amelia's laugh was bitter, too old for her face. "At least that's what she told me to tell you." She pressed the recorder into my hands. It was warm from her grip, and I could feel her pulse through her fingertips, rapid, panicked, guilty. "I recorded this by accident 3 days ago. I came home early from class and I heard voices in Mom's office. I thought maybe she was being robbed or something, so I started recording on my phone for evidence." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have deleted it. I should have pretended I never heard it." The recorder felt heavier than it should have. "Heard what? Just please listen. And Dad, when you're done, there's something else you need to know." She fled upstairs, leaving me alone with the device that would split my life into before and after. I pressed play. At first, there was only static and muffled movement. Then I heard my wife's voice, breathless and urgent. "Rick, we can't keep doing this. Jake's getting suspicious." My blood turned to ice water. A man's voice responded, smooth, confident, younger than mine. "Let him suspect. What's he gonna do? Leave you? He's too weak. Besides, you said yourself the marriage has been dead for years." "It's not that simple. There's Amelia to think about, and Ross. The house, everything we've built. Everything you've built," Rick corrected. "What has Jake contributed? That failing auto shop? Those calloused hands? Come on, Marta. You're meant for better things. We're meant for better things." The sound that came next made my stomach lurch. Kissing. Urgent whispers. The unmistakable sounds of clothes being removed. I jabbed the stop button so hard I nearly broke it. 23 years of marriage. 2 children. A mortgage we'd struggled to pay. Vacations we'd saved for months to afford. Arguments we'd worked through. Dreams we'd shared in the dark. All of it reduced to background noise from my wife's affair. The house creaked above me. Marta's voice drifted down through the heating vents, professional and composed. "Yes, Mr. Dorsey. I'll have those reports ready by morning. You know how committed I am to this company." Committed. The word tasted like poison. I climbed the stairs on unsteady legs, each step a small betrayal of my own. The hallway stretched before me like a tunnel, family photos watching my progress with accusing eyes. Amelia's door was closed, but I could hear her crying softly behind it. Marta's office door stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see her silhouette against the blue glow of her computer screen. She wore the red silk blouse I'd bought her for her birthday. The one she'd claimed was too fancy for everyday wear. She was typing rapidly, probably composing another lie for tomorrow's deception. I retreated to our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed we'd shared for over 2 decades. The mattress sagged under my weight, worn down by years of restless sleep and whispered conversations about bills and kids and the future we thought we were building together. The recorder sat on my palm like a grenade with the pin pulled. I pressed play again. This time I listened to the whole thing, every gasp, every endearment, every casual dismissal of our life together. Rick's voice grew familiar in the worst possible way. I'd heard it before, at Marta's company parties. He was the golden boy of Hartwell and Associates, the marketing firm where my wife had clawed her way up from secretary to senior account manager. The affair had been going on for months, maybe longer. They had pet names for each other. Inside jokes. Plans for a weekend getaway to the lake house Rick's family owned upstate. When it finally ended, I sat in the darkness for a long time, listening to the rain and the sound of my marriage dying. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Dad? Amelia stood in the doorway, her face puffy from crying. She'd changed into an old college sweatshirt that made her look like the little girl who used to crawl into the same bed during thunderstorms. I heard it all, I said. She nodded and sat beside me, the mattress dipping under her slight weight. I'm sorry, I know I should have told you right away, but I kept hoping I was wrong somehow, that maybe it wasn't what it sounded like. You said there was something else. Amelia's face crumpled. Rick isn't just some guy from Mom's work. He's been to our house, Dad, multiple times. When you were at the shop, I saw his car in the driveway last Tuesday when I came home for lunch. The betrayal cut deeper. My own home, violated. My own bed, probably. There's more. Amelia's voice dropped to a whisper. I think Mrs. Falco next door knows. I saw her watching from her window when Rick left. She had this look on her face like she was storing up gossip for later. Mrs. Falco was the neighborhood's unofficial information broker. If she knew, everyone would know soon enough. My humiliation would be complete and public. Dad, what are you going to do? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She had my stubborn chin and Marta's calculating eyes, but right now those eyes held nothing but concern for her old man. Despite everything, despite the mess her mother had made, Amelia was still on my side. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I need you to promise me something. Don't tell your mother you recorded this. Don't tell her you know anything. Can you do that? She nodded. What about Ross? My son was in his final year at State, studying engineering like I'd always wanted to. He called every Sunday, full of plans for the future and gratitude for the sacrifices his parents had made for his education. He didn't need this poison in his life, not yet. We'll tell him when the time is right. Amelia hugged me then, fierce and desperate. I love you, Dad. Whatever happens, I love you. After she left, I lay in the dark, listening to Marta finish her conference call. When she finally came to bed, she moved carefully, trying not to wake me. She smelled like expensive perfume and guilt. Jake, you awake? I kept my breathing steady, feigning sleep. She settled beside me with a soft sigh, and within minutes, her breathing grew deep and regular. She slept the sleep of someone with a clear conscience, or someone who'd gotten very good at compartmentalizing her sins. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, planning my next move. The next morning, Marta kissed my cheek before leaving for work, the same perfunctory gesture she'd performed for months. I might be late tonight, she said, not meeting my eyes. Big presentation tomorrow. Sure thing, I replied, sipping coffee that tasted like ash. I'll probably work late, too. Got a transmission to rebuild. She nodded and gathered her things. Laptop bag, designer purse, the red silk blouse now carefully hidden under a conservative blazer. The woman I'd married had been beautiful in a natural, unassuming way. This new version was polished and distant, like a photograph of someone I used to know. After her car disappeared down Maple Street, I called in sick to the shop. Tommy, my business partner, didn't ask questions. We'd known each other since high school, and he could hear something broken in my voice. I had work to do. Rick Brennan, I learned from 30 minutes of internet searching, was 34 years old, divorced, and living in the Riverside condos downtown, the expensive complex that had gone up where the old textile mill used to be. His LinkedIn profile painted him as a marketing genius, but his social media told a different story. The man was a peacock, constantly posting photos of his BMW, his expensive watches, his weekend trips to wine country. In several recent photos, I spotted a familiar figure in the background. Marta, carefully positioned to look casual, accidental. But I knew my wife's poses. She'd practiced them in mirrors for years, perfecting the angles that made her look younger, more sophisticated. The deception ran deeper than I'd imagined. I drove past Rick's building twice before parking across the street at a coffee shop with a clear view of the garage entrance. The barista, a kid with purple hair and multiple piercings, looked at me suspiciously when I ordered my 4th cup of coffee in 2 hours. You waiting for someone? She asked. Something like that. At 11:47 a.m., Rick's silver BMW emerged from the garage. He was talking on his phone, gesturing animatedly with one hand. Even from a distance, I could see his perfectly styled hair, his expensive suit, the confident set of his shoulders. This was the man my wife preferred to me. I followed him to the Hartwell and Associates building, a gleaming glass tower that made my little auto shop look like a shack. Rick parked in a reserved spot near the front entrance, the kind of perk that came with success and ambition. Two things I'd apparently lost somewhere along the way. My phone buzzed with a text from Amelia. Mom just called. She's bringing someone from work to dinner tomorrow night. Says it's important for her career. The audacity was breathtaking. Marta was planning to bring her lover into our home, to sit at our table, to shake my hand, and make small talk while secretly mocking me. I texted back, "Let her." "Dad, are you sure? Trust me." That afternoon, I paid a visit to Mrs. Falco. Our neighbor was 73 years old, lived alone since her husband's death, and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of everyone's business on Maple Street. She answered her door in a flowered housecoat, her gray hair perfectly curled despite the early hour. "Jake Sullivan. What a surprise. Come in, come in. I was just making tea." Her living room was a shrine to nosiness. Windows facing every direction, a comfortable chair positioned for optimal surveillance, and a pair of binoculars for bird watching on the side table. "Mrs. Falco, I need to ask you about something, and I need your word that it stays between us." Her eyes lit up with the thrill of conspiracy. "Of course, dear. What's troubling you? Have you noticed any unusual activity at my house during the day? When I'm at work?" She set down her teacup with theatrical precision. "Oh, Jake, I was wondering when you'd ask." The story tumbled out in a torrent of carefully observed details. Rick's BMW in my driveway every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 weeks. His expensive suits, his cocky stride, the way he'd let himself in through the back door like he owned the place. Mrs. Falco had photographed his license plate just in case, and even noted the times of his arrivals and departures. "I wanted to tell you," she said, patting my hand with genuine sympathy, "but it's not my place to interfere in other people's marriages. Though I must say, that young man has an arrogant way about him. Not at all suitable for a woman of Marta's, well, her age." The casual cruelty of the observation stung, but Mrs. Falco wasn't wrong. Rick was younger, more successful, more polished. Everything I wasn't. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm not sure yet, but when I figure it out, I might need your help." Her smile was predatory. "You just say the word, dear." That evening, Marta came home with takeout from the expensive Thai place downtown. "I thought we could have a nice dinner together," she said, unpacking containers of pad thai and green curry. We never seemed to talk anymore. The irony was suffocating. She wanted to talk now, probably to ease her guilt or set up tomorrow's deception. I watched her move around our kitchen with practiced efficiency, this woman who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my bank account while planning her escape. "How was work?" I asked. "Busy. We're pitching a new client tomorrow. Could be huge for the company." She sat across from me at the table, where we'd eaten thousands of meals together. "Rick Brennan is leading the presentation. He's really quite brilliant." The name hung between us like a blade. "Rick Brennan? He's one of our senior associates. You met him at the Christmas party last year, remember? Tall, dark hair, drives that silver BMW." I remembered. He'd shaken my hand with the firm grip of a man who'd never worked with his hands, who'd never had grease under his fingernails or calluses on his palms. He'd called me buddy and asked what I did for a living with the polite disinterest of someone already dismissing me. "Right," I said. "Brilliant. He's coming to dinner tomorrow night. I hope that's okay. It's important that I maintain good relationships with my colleagues." The word relationships carried extra weight, a double meaning that made my jaw clench. "Of course. I'll make sure to be here." Marta smiled, perhaps relieved by my easy acceptance. "Wonderful. I thought I'd make that salmon dish you like." The salmon dish I liked. She was planning to cook my favorite meal for her lover's visit to our home. The psychological cruelty was almost artistic in its precision. After dinner, I retreated to the garage, under the pretense of organizing my tools. Really, I needed space to think, to plan, to figure out how to turn tomorrow night's dinner into something Rick Brennan would never forget. The garage had always been my sanctuary, my workbench, my tools, my projects in various stages of completion. This was where I felt competent, where my hands knew what to do and my experience mattered. This was where Jake Sullivan still existed before Marta's betrayal had turned me into a stranger in my own life. I picked up a wrench and tested its weight. Not for violence, I wasn't that kind of man. But there was something comforting about holding a tool, about having the power to fix things or take them apart. Tomorrow night, I would meet my wife's lover properly. And Rick Brennan would learn that underestimating Jake Sullivan was a mistake he'd regret for the rest of his life. I spent the next day at the shop, but my mind was elsewhere. Tommy noticed my distraction when I nearly dropped a transmission on my foot. "Jake, you sure you're okay? You've been off since yesterday?" "Just some stuff at home," I said, not meeting his eyes. "Marta?" Tommy had never liked my wife, though he'd been diplomatic about it over the years. He thought she looked down on blue-collar work, on men like us who built things with our hands instead of pushing papers around glass towers. Something like that. He nodded and didn't push. That's the thing about real friends. They know when to give you space. I left work early and stopped at the liquor store. If Rick Brennan was coming to my house, I wanted him comfortable, relaxed, unsuspecting. A nice bottle of wine would help with that. Marta was already home when I arrived, bustling around the kitchen in the red silk blouse. She'd spent extra time on her makeup and hair, transforming herself into the polished professional who belonged in Rick's world instead of mine. "You look nice," I said, and meant it. She was beautiful, my wife. That had never been the problem. "Thank you." She seemed surprised by the compliment. "Could you set the table? Rick should be here by 7. I arranged our wedding china on the dining room table, each plate a small mockery of the vows we'd taken 23 years ago. For better or worse, in sickness and health, forsaking all others. The last one had apparently been more of a suggestion than a promise. Amelia appeared at 6:30, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater. She'd agreed to stay for dinner, to help maintain the illusion of family normalcy while I figured out my next move. "Dad, are you sure about this?" she whispered while Marta was upstairs touching up her lipstick. "Trust me." The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Rick Brennan believed in punctuality, apparently. Another mark in his favor, another way he was superior to the blue-collar husband who sometimes ran late because a customer's car had broken down. I opened the door to find him holding flowers. White roses, expensive and elegant. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. And his smile was perfect, practiced, predatory. "Jake, great to see you again, buddy." The handshake was firm, confident. "Thanks for having me over." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, matching his smile. "Come on in." Marta appeared at the top of the stairs like an actress making an entrance. Rick's face lit up when he saw her. And for just a moment, his professional mask slipped. The hunger in his eyes was raw, possessive. This wasn't just an affair for him. He thought he was winning her, claiming her, taking her away from the inferior man who'd never deserved her in the first place. "Rick, I'm so glad you could make it." Marta descended the stairs with calculated grace, accepting the flowers with a smile that never quite reached me anymore. Dinner was a masterclass in deception. Rick complimented the salmon, praised the wine selection, asked polite questions about my work. He was smooth, charming, everything a successful man should be. And under it all, I could feel his smugness, his certainty that he was the better man. "So Jake, Marta tells me you own an auto repair shop. That must be interesting work." The pause before interesting spoke volumes. Rick had probably never changed his own oil, never fixed anything more complicated than a loose screw. In his world, manual labor was something other people did. "It has its rewards," I said. "There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again." "I'm sure." Rick's smile was indulgent. Of course, in today's economy, small businesses face so many challenges. The overhead, the competition from chains, the constant worry about staying afloat. I don't know how you manage the stress. Marta shot him a warning look, but the damage was done. Rick was establishing dominance, making sure I knew my place in the hierarchy. He was the successful one, the catch, the upgrade, from the grease monkey who'd somehow fooled Marta into marrying him 2 decades ago. "We do okay?" I said mildly. "Not everyone needs a BMW and a corner office to feel successful." Rick's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course not. Different people have different definitions of success." Amelia had been quiet through most of the meal, but now she spoke up. Dad's shop has been in business for 15 years. He's got customers who won't take their cars anywhere else. That's wonderful, Rick said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. Loyalty is so important in small businesses. The conversation moved to safer topics: the weather, local politics, Amelia's studies. Rick was knowledgeable and articulate, the kind of man who could discuss wine pairings and foreign policy with equal confidence. I found myself almost liking him, which made the betrayal cut deeper. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Rick settled into my favorite chair like he belonged there, accepting a glass of expensive whiskey with the casual entitlement of a man accustomed to the finer things. "This is a lovely home," he said, looking around at the family photos, the comfortable furniture, the life Marta and I had built together. "So cozy." Another calculated insult. Cozy meant small, modest, beneath his standards. "We like it," I said. "It's got good bones, built to last." "Like your marriage," Rick said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The comment hung in the air like smoke. Marta shifted uncomfortably on the couch, and Amelia's knuckles went white around her wine glass. 23 years, I agreed, through good times and bad. "That's admirable," Rick said. "So many couples give up at the first sign of trouble these days. They don't understand that sometimes you have to evolve, grow, find new sources of happiness." He was talking about my wife like I wasn't in the room, laying claim to her with words I was supposed to be too stupid to understand. "Evolution," I mused. "Interesting concept. Of course, not every change is an improvement. Sometimes what looks like progress is really just decay." Rick's eyes sharpened. He was beginning to suspect that the dumb grease monkey might be smarter than he'd assumed. "Well," Marta said quickly, "who wants dessert?" The evening continued for another hour, each minute a small torture. Rick grew bolder, more proprietary, touching Marta's hand when he made a point, complimenting her insights, treating her like his intellectual equal in a way that implied I never had. When he finally left, he shook my hand again, that same firm grip that was supposed to establish dominance. "Thanks for a wonderful evening, Jake. We should do this again soon." "I'm sure we will," I replied. After his BMW disappeared down Maple Street, Marta began clearing dishes with nervous energy. "That went well," she said, not looking at me. Rick was very impressed. "I'll bet he was." She paused, sensing something in my tone. "Jake, is everything okay?" "Fine, just tired. I think I'll turn in early." I left her in the kitchen and climbed the stairs to our bedroom. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Falco's living room light still on. She'd probably watched the whole evening, noting Rick's arrival time, his confident stride, the flowers he'd brought for another man's wife. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Enjoy dinner. Your wife has excellent taste in everything. R." The arrogance was breathtaking. Rick was so confident in his superiority that he was taunting me directly, marking his territory like an animal. I deleted the text and lay down on my side of the bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to Marta move around downstairs. She was probably calling Rick, debriefing about the evening, laughing about how clueless her husband was. But Jake Sullivan wasn't as clueless as they thought. And tomorrow, Rick Brennan would learn that underestimating a man with nothing left to lose was the biggest mistake of his privileged life. The next morning brought the first crack in Rick's perfect facade. I was at the shop by 7, but instead of working, I was researching. The internet is a wonderful tool for a man with time and motivation. Rick Brennan, I discovered, wasn't quite the golden boy he pretended to be. His divorce 2 years earlier had been messy, expensive, and public. His ex-wife had accused him of infidelity and emotional manipulation in court documents that were part of the public record. More interesting was his employment history. Rick had been fired from his previous job at a marketing firm in Chicago for inappropriate workplace relationships. The details were vague, but the pattern was clear. My wife wasn't his first conquest. She was just the latest in a series of married women who'd fallen for his charm. I printed everything and filed it carefully in a folder marked Insurance. Tommy found me hunched over the computer at noon, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. "Jake, what the heck are you doing?" I looked up at my oldest friend, this man who'd stood beside me at my wedding and celebrated the births of my children. Tommy deserved the truth. "Marta's having an affair." He sat down heavily on a nearby stool, his face cycling through surprise, anger, and finally resignation. "I wondered. She's been different lately, more polished, like she was trying to impress someone. His name is Rick Brennan. He works at her company. Last night he came to my house for dinner and basically pissed on my territory while I served him salmon. Jesus, Jake, what are you going to do? I'm going to destroy him. The words surprised me with their venom. I'd never been a vindictive man, never one to hold grudges or plot revenge. But something had changed in me over the past few days. The humiliation, the betrayal, the casual cruelty of Rick's dominance display, it had awakened something dark and calculating that I didn't recognize. Be careful, Tommy warned. Men like that, they've got lawyers, connections. They can make your life heck if you're not smart about it. Then I'll have to be smarter than he is. That afternoon, I drove to Hartwell and Associates and parked across the street with a clear view of the employee parking garage. Rick's BMW sat in its reserved spot, gleaming in the autumn sun like a silver trophy. I waited. At 4:30, Rick emerged from the building with Marta at his side. They walked close together, her hand brushing his arm, their heads bent in intimate conversation. To anyone watching, they looked like lovers, not colleagues. They separated at the garage entrance, Marta heading to her sensible Honda, Rick to his BM. But before he got in his car, Rick pulled out his phone and made a call. Even from across the street, I could see him laughing, gesturing, performing for his audience. My phone buzzed. A text from Marta. Working late tonight, don't wait up. The lie was so casual, so practiced, that it took my breath away. How long had she been doing this? How many late nights and weekend work sessions had been cover stories for her affair? I followed Rick's BMW through downtown traffic, staying back 3 cars to avoid detection. He drove like he lived, aggressively, impatiently, cutting off other drivers with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never faced real consequences. His destination surprised me. Not the expensive restaurant I'd expected, but a modest sports bar called Murphy's Tap House. It was the kind of place where working men went to drink beer and watch games on big screens, not somewhere a man in a $1,000 suit would normally be caught dead. I parked across the street and watched through the window as Rick took a seat at the bar. Within minutes, he was surrounded by a group of younger men in business suits. Colleagues from Hartwell and Associates probably, out for after-work drinks. This was my chance. I walked into Murphy's like I belonged there, which I did. This was my kind of place, full of men who worked with their hands and didn't apologize for it. I took a seat at the far end of the bar, close enough to hear Rick's conversation, but far enough away to avoid notice. Rick was holding court, telling stories that made his audience laugh and nod with admiration. He was good at this, the alpha male routine, the casual charisma that made other men want to be him and women want to be with him. So there I was, Rick was saying, having dinner at this guy's house, eating his food, drinking his wine, while his wife is giving me these looks across the table. The poor bastard had no idea what was happening right under his nose. The group erupted in laughter. One of the younger men, barely out of college by the look of him, shook his head in amazement. Dude, that's cold. What if he finds out? Rick shrugged, taking a long pull from his beer. What's he gonna do? The guy's a mechanic. Blue collar, no education, no connections. His wife is way out of his league. She just married young and settled. Now she's ready for an upgrade. To you? Another colleague asked. To me. Rick's smile was predatory. She's already talking about leaving him. Just needs to work up the courage. These suburban housewives, they're all the same. Desperate to escape their boring lives, hungry for a real man who can show them what they've been missing. My hands clenched around my beer bottle. The casual cruelty of his words, the reduction of my 23-year marriage to a punchline for his entertainment, made something dark and violent stir in my chest. What about the kids? Someone asked. 2 of them, both grown. They'll get over it. Kids are resilient. Rick signaled the bartender for another round. Besides, once Mom is happy again, they'll understand. Right now, she's wasted on a man who can't appreciate what he has. I'd heard enough. I left money on the bar and walked out into the cool evening air, my mind racing with possibilities. Rick had just given me everything I needed. His arrogance, his casual dismissal of my family, his certainty that he was untouchable. He was wrong about that last part. The next few days passed in a blur of planning and preparation. I called in favors, made discreet inquiries, and slowly assembled the pieces of Rick Brennan's destruction. Mrs. Falco proved invaluable, providing detailed surveillance reports of Rick's visits to my house. She'd even managed to photograph him leaving through the back door, looking rumpled and satisfied. "That young man has no shame," she clucked, handing me a manila envelope full of evidence. "In my day, affairs were conducted with more discretion." "Times change," I said. "Indeed they do. What's your plan, dear?" I smiled, feeling the unfamiliar weight of calculated malice. "I'm going to give Rick Brennan exactly what he deserves." The pieces were falling into place. Soon, very soon, Rick would learn that Jake Sullivan wasn't the weak, ignorant husband he'd assumed. And when that lesson came, it would be devastating, public, and absolutely final. Friday afternoon, I received a text from Marta. "Girls' night out with Aaron and the team. Don't wait up." Aaron was Marta's best friend from work, a sharp-tongued woman who'd never liked me. She was also, I suspected, Rick's ally in this whole mess, the friend who covered for Marta's lies and probably encouraged the affair. But I knew where my wife would really be spending her Friday night. At 7 p.m., I parked outside Rick's condo building and waited. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of burning leaves and the promise of winter. Through the lobby's glass doors, I could see the doorman reading a newspaper, occasionally glancing up at the security monitors. Marta's Honda pulled into the visitor parking area at 7:23. She sat in her car for a moment, checking her makeup in the rearview mirror, transforming herself from suburban wife to sophisticated mistress. When she finally emerged, she wore a black dress I'd never seen before. Something expensive and revealing that she'd bought for another man's eyes. I waited 10 minutes, then followed her into the building. The doorman looked up as I approached, taking in my work clothes and calloused hands. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Rick Brennan. He's expecting me." The lie came easily. The doorman consulted his list, found no appointment, but something in my expression made him step aside. Sometimes working-class anger carries its own authority. Rick's condo was on the 8th floor, corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. I could hear music playing inside, jazz, sophisticated, the soundtrack to seduction. I knocked firmly on the door. The music stopped. Footsteps approached, and I heard Rick's voice through the door. "Who is it?" "Jake Sullivan. We need to talk." A long pause, whispered conversation, then the door opened, revealing Rick in an expensive bathrobe, his hair disheveled, his face flushed with guilt and anger. "Jake, this is unexpected." "I'm sure it is." I pushed past him into the condo, taking in the sleek furniture, the abstract art, the bottle of champagne chilling in a silver bucket. Marta emerged from the bedroom, wearing Rick's shirt and nothing else, her face pale with shock and shame. "Hello, honey," I said. "How was girls' night?" The three of us stood in Rick's living room like actors who'd forgotten their lines. Through the windows, the city lights twinkled below us, indifferent to the small human drama playing out in the expensive apartment. "Jake, I can explain," Marta began. "Can you?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording Amelia had made. My wife's voice filled the room, breathless with passion for another man, dismissing our marriage as dead weight. Marta's face crumpled. Rick, to his credit, didn't try to deny anything. Instead, he straightened his shoulders and met my eyes with defiant arrogance. "So now you know," he said. "What are you going to do about it?" "That's an interesting question." I walked to his wall of windows, looking out at the view that probably cost him $3,000 a month. "You know what I realized, Rick? You think you're better than me? Smarter, more successful, more deserving of my wife, and maybe you're right about some of that." Rick relaxed slightly, thinking he'd won. "But you made one crucial mistake," I continued. "You underestimated what a man will do when he has nothing left to lose." I turned back to face them, and something in my expression made Rick take a step backward. "Jake, let's be reasonable about this," he said. "Marta and we didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. These things, they're complicated." "No," I interrupted. "They're actually very simple. You wanted my wife, so you took her. You wanted to humiliate me, so you came to my house and ate my food while planning to destroy my family. You thought I was too weak, too stupid, too beneath you to fight back." I pulled out the manila envelope Mrs. Falco had given me and scattered the photographs across Rick's glass coffee table. Images of him leaving my house, kissing my wife in the parking garage at work, holding her hand at restaurants across town. But here's what you didn't know about Jake Sullivan, I said. I'm very good at fixing things that are broken. And Rick, you and my wife have broken something that can't be repaired. Marta was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streams. Jake, please, I made a mistake. I was confused, unhappy. You were bored, I corrected. Bored with your blue-collar husband and your suburban life. You wanted excitement, sophistication, a man who could give you the life you thought you deserved. Well, congratulations, you found him. I walked to Rick's desk and picked up a framed photo of him with some business colleagues, all of them smiling and confident in their expensive suits. Rick, do you know what I did yesterday? He shook his head, wariness creeping into his eyes. I had a very interesting conversation with your ex-wife in Chicago. Lovely woman, very eager to share stories about your workplace relationships. Rick's face went white. I also spoke with 3 other women you've mentored over the years. Amazing how similar their stories are. The flowers, the expensive dinners, the promises about leaving their husbands for a better life. You have quite a pattern, don't you? You can't prove anything, Rick said, but his voice lacked conviction. I don't have to prove anything. I just have to share it. I pulled out my phone and showed him the contact list I'd compiled. Your boss at Hartwell and Associates, the HR director, the partners who decide promotions and bonuses. They're all very interested in employee conduct, especially when it involves married colleagues. Rick's arrogance was cracking, revealing the insecurity underneath. You're bluffing, am I? I scrolled through my phone and showed him a draft email with the subject line, concerning Rick Brennan's workplace behavior. The recipient list included everyone who mattered at Hartwell and Associates. 1 click, I said. That's all it takes to end your career. Your reputation, your ability to prey on married women who are looking for something better than what they have. Jake, don't do this, Marta pleaded. Think about our family, our children. I am thinking about them. I looked at my wife, really looked at her for the first time in months. Amelia is the one who recorded you, Marta. Your own daughter had to listen to you betray everything we built together. She's been carrying that burden for days, torn between protecting me and protecting you. Marta's sobs grew louder. And Ross, I continued, our son who calls every Sunday to thank us for his education, for the sacrifices we made, so he could have a better life. What do you think this will do to him? Then don't tell him, Rick said desperately. We can work this out. Marta and I will end it. She'll stay with you. Nobody has to get hurt. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Nobody has to get hurt. Rick, you've been hurting my family for months. You've been in my house, in my bed probably, laughing at the stupid husband who was too blind to see what was happening under his own roof. I walked closer to him, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. But you know what really pisses me off? Last night at Murphy's Tap House, telling your buddies about the poor bastard mechanic whose wife was ready for an upgrade. Calling my children resilient like their family breaking apart was just a minor inconvenience. Rick's face went ashen. He hadn't seen me at the bar, hadn't realized his cruel performance had an audience. That's when I realized something, I continued. You're not just a cheater, Rick. You're a predator. You target married women, break up families, and move on to the next conquest. Well, congratulations. You just picked the wrong family to destroy. I held up my phone, finger hovering over the send button. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay away from my wife, my family, and my life. You're going to transfer to another office, another city if necessary. And if I ever see you again, if I ever hear that you've contacted Marta or tried to interfere in our lives, this email goes out to everyone who matters. You can't do this, Rick said, but his voice was weak. Watch me. I hit send. The email disappeared into cyberspace, carrying with it Rick Brennan's reputation, his career prospects, and his ability to prey on other families. Within hours, his bosses would know about his pattern of workplace affairs. By Monday, he'd be a pariah at Hartwell and Associates. Rick stared at his phone as notification after notification began popping up. Emails, calls, text messages from colleagues who'd received copies of his ex-wife's statements, photos of his various conquests, documentation of his predatory behavior. You've destroyed me, he whispered. No, I corrected. I've exposed you. There's a difference. I turned to Marta, who was curled up on Rick's expensive couch like a broken doll. As for you, I said, you have a choice to make. You can come home with me right now and we can try to salvage what's left of our marriage. Or you can stay here with Rick and see how long his love lasts when he's unemployed and unemployable. Marta looked between us, her husband of 23 years and her lover of a few months. The choice should have been easy, but I could see the calculation in her eyes, the weighing of options and consequences. Jake, choose, I interrupted, right now, because this is the only chance you get. She stood slowly, Rick's shirt hanging loose on her frame, and walked toward me. For a moment, I thought she was coming home. Then she stopped and looked back at Rick, who was still staring at his phone in shock. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. But she didn't move toward the door. I nodded, understanding. Goodbye, Marta. I left them there in Rick's condo. Two people who'd thought they were smart enough to destroy a family without consequences, now facing the ruins of their own lives. The elevator ride down felt like the longest 8 floors of my life. Outside, the October air was sharp and clean. I walked to my truck, started the engine, and drove home to the house on Maple Street, where my daughter was waiting with tears in her eyes and forgiveness in her heart. The war was over, and for the first time in months, Jake Sullivan had won. The house felt different when I walked through the front door. Emptier, but also cleaner somehow, like a fever had finally broken. Amelia was waiting in the living room, her college textbooks spread across the coffee table, but her eyes were on me. Dad, how did it go? I sat down beside her, suddenly feeling every one of my 48 years. It's over. And Mom, she made her choice. Amelia nodded, tears starting to flow. I'm sorry, I know you wanted her to come home. I wanted her to want to come home, I corrected, or there's a difference. We sat together in the silence of our broken family, but it wasn't the crushing silence of secrets and lies. This was the quiet of truth finally spoken, of consequences finally faced. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, thinking it was Rick trying to negotiate or threaten. But the message was from Marta. I'm staying at Aaron's tonight. We need to talk about the house, the kids, everything. I'm sorry, Jake, for all of it. I showed the message to Amelia, who read it with the weary expression of someone much older than 21. She's not coming back, is she? No, I said, she's not. The next few days passed in a blur of lawyers, phone calls, and difficult conversations. Ross drove down from college on Saturday morning, his face grim with the knowledge that his family had imploded while he was studying for midterms. Dad, I'm so sorry, he said, hugging me in the driveway, with the fierce desperation of a son who'd just realized his father was human. Not your fault, son. Not your fault at all. We told him everything, the affair, the recording, the confrontation at Rick's condo. Ross listened with the analytical mind of an engineering student, asking practical questions about divorce proceedings and asset division. What about Mom's job? He asked. That question answered itself on Monday morning. Marta called at 8 a.m., her voice hollow with defeat. They fired me, she said without preamble. Mr. Dorsey called me into his office this morning and said my personal conduct was incompatible with company values. They're giving me 2 weeks severance and a non-disclosure agreement. What about Rick? Gone. Transferred to the Portland office, effective immediately. Apparently 3 other women came forward over the weekend with similar stories. The company wants him as far away as possible. I felt no satisfaction in her pain, only the grim recognition that actions have consequences, even for people who think they're above them. Jake, I need to ask you something. What? The recording Amelia made. Do you still have it? Yes. Could you delete it? Please. I know I have no right to ask, but the thought of it existing, of what I said about our marriage. I looked at the digital recorder sitting on my desk, the small device that had started the avalanche of truth and consequences. Already done, I lied. Her sob of relief was audible through the phone. Thank you. After she hung up, I sat staring at the recorder for a long time. Then I picked it up, walked to the garage, and smashed it with a hammer until it was nothing but plastic fragments and circuit boards. Some truths were too painful to preserve. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Marta's affair, documented in photographs and witness statements, left her with little negotiating power. She got half the house's equity and half our savings. But I kept the house itself and my business. More importantly, both kids chose to stay with me. Mom's lost, Amelia explained one evening as we sat on the front porch watching Mrs. Falco water her garden with theatrical precision. She doesn't know who she is anymore. She thought Rick was going to give her this glamorous new life, and instead she lost everything. Do you hate her? Amelia considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. No, I'm angry and disappointed and hurt. But I don't hate her. She's still my mom, even if she made terrible choices. Ross was less forgiving. She destroyed our family for a guy who dumped her the minute his career was threatened, he said during one of our Sunday phone calls. That's not a mistake, Dad. That's a character flaw. Winter came early that year, blanketing Maple Street in snow and giving me time to rebuild. I hired 2 new mechanics at the shop, expanded our services, and started advertising in neighboring towns. Business was good. Word had gotten around about the mechanic who'd outsmarted the corporate golden boy, and working-class customers appreciated the story. Mrs. Falco became a regular visitor, bringing casseroles and gossip in equal measure. She'd appointed herself the neighborhood's unofficial chronicler of the Sullivan family drama, and her version of events grew more dramatic with each telling. That Rick fellow, she confided one afternoon over coffee, he tried to come back last month, parked right across the street and sat there for 2 hours, just staring at your house. What did you do? Called the police, of course, told them there was a suspicious man casing the neighborhood. They had a very stern conversation with him about harassment and restraining orders. I smiled despite myself. Mrs. Falco was a formidable ally to have in your corner. Spring arrived with the promise of new beginnings. Amelia finished her junior year with a 3.8 GPA and announced her intention to transfer to a college closer to home. Ross was accepted into a prestigious graduate program and would be moving back to Ohio after graduation. We want to be near you, Dad, Amelia explained. Family's important. Marta had moved to an apartment across town and taken a job at a smaller marketing firm for half her previous salary. We spoke occasionally about practical matters, insurance, tax forms, the kids' college expenses, but the conversations were brief and businesslike. She never asked about Rick, and I never volunteered information. But through Mrs. Falco's extensive intelligence network, I learned that he'd lasted exactly 3 months in Portland before being quietly fired for performance issues. His reputation had followed him across the country, making him unemployable in his chosen field. The last I heard, he was selling insurance in Phoenix under a different name. On a warm evening in May, almost 8 months after the night that changed everything, I was working in the garage when Amelia appeared in the doorway. Dad, there's someone here to see you. I looked up from the engine I was rebuilding to see Marta standing behind our daughter, looking smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her choices. Hello, Jake. Marta? We stood there in the garage that had always been my sanctuary, surrounded by the tools and projects that defined my world. She looked around with new eyes, perhaps seeing for the first time the skill and craftsmanship that Rick had dismissed as beneath notice. I wanted to apologize, she said. Really apologize, not just the words I said during the divorce. I wanted you to know that I understand what I destroyed, what I threw away for someone who never cared about me the way you did. I set down my wrench and gave her my full attention. I was selfish, she continued, bored and selfish and stupid. I convinced myself that our marriage was dead, that you didn't appreciate me, that I deserved something better. But the truth is, I was the one who stopped appreciating what I had. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserved better than what I gave you. Because our children deserve better. Because 23 years of marriage should have meant more than it did to me when I threw it away. I nodded, accepting her words, but not absolving her. I also wanted you to know that I'm moving to California. My sister offered me a job at her company, a chance to start over somewhere nobody knows my story. What about the kids? They're adults now. They can make their own choices about whether to stay in touch. Her smile was sad but genuine. Besides, they have you. They've always had you, even when I was too blind to see what that meant. She turned to leave, then stopped. Jake, for what it's worth, you were right about Rick. He wasn't a better man. He wasn't even a good man. He was just different, and I mistook different for better. I know. You always were smarter than you let on. After she left, I stood in my garage, surrounded by the tools of my trade, the honest work that had built a life and raised a family and outlasted the storm of betrayal and revenge. 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Amelia was marrying her college boyfriend, a young man studying to be a teacher who treated her with the respect and devotion she deserved. The wedding would be small, intimate, held in the backyard of the house on Maple Street. Ross would be the best man. Mrs. Falco had volunteered to coordinate the catering. Tommy and his wife would handle the music. Marta's name was not on the invitation. On the morning of the wedding, as I adjusted my tie in the mirror of the bedroom I now occupied alone, I thought about the man I'd become over the past year and a half. The betrayal had changed me, hardened me in some ways, but it had also clarified things. I knew now what mattered: family, loyalty, honest work, and the quiet satisfaction of building something that lasts. I knew the difference between love and possession, between partnership and conquest, between a man worth trusting and a predator in expensive clothes. The wedding was perfect. Amelia glowed with happiness. Ross gave a speech that made everyone cry. And Mrs. Falco's gossip network ensured that half the neighborhood showed up to celebrate. As I danced with my daughter under the string lights Tommy had hung in the backyard, she whispered in my ear, "Thank you, Dad, for everything. For fighting for our family, for showing us what real strength looks like, for being the man we could count on when everything fell apart." "That's what fathers do," I replied. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and the dishes were washed and the lights were turned off, I sat on my front porch with a beer and looked out at Maple Street. The house was quiet but not empty. Ross was staying the weekend, and Amelia and her new husband would be living in the apartment above the garage until they finished school. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, my chest tightened with old anxiety. But the message was from Amelia's new mother-in-law, thanking me for welcoming her son into our family. I smiled and put the phone away. In the distance, a car turned onto Maple Street, its headlights sweeping across the familiar houses where ordinary people lived, ordinary lives full of small victories and quiet defeats. The car slowed as it passed my house, and for just a moment, I thought I recognized the driver. But then it accelerated and disappeared into the night, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my hard-won peace. I finished my beer, turned off the porch light, and went inside to the house that was truly mine now, filled with the people who had chosen to stay when everything else fell apart. Some stories end with forgiveness and reconciliation. Others end with justice and consequences. This one ended with the simple truth that a man who knows his own worth doesn't need anyone else's validation to sleep soundly at night. Jake Sullivan had learned that lesson the hard way, but he had learned it completely, and that made all the difference in the world.